He was 15 years old when he was the editor of Heavy Metal Digest, probably the first punk fanzine. Danny Sugerman has since gone on to be a freelance music journalist, support the careers of Iggy Pop, publicize and manage Ray Manzarek, founding Door and keyboardist. And it was in 1968 that Danny worked for the Doors office, first thumbing through the 2,000 letters a week to Jim Morrison in the fan mail room, and 10 years later has co-authored a book with Jerry Hopkins, who did the Elvis biography, called No One Here Gets Out Alive, a biography on Jim Morrison to be published in spring 1980 by Warner Books. Danny, thank you for being here.
Hey, it's good to see you.
How are you?
Good to be here with you.
Let's talk about the Doors.
Yeah, let's. Where do you want to begin?
Well, the last few years there's been like a whole mushrooming of Doors fanaticism and a resurgence of the critical appraise and everything of the Doors. A lot of new bands acknowledging Jim Morrison, the Doors' influence, and there seems to be just a whole mushrooming of just an acknowledgement that the critics and the public have toward this band and this special person.
Well, I think in the past 3 years it's become more visible on an international level, the influence that the Doors have had, and particularly with the release of An American Prayer, the influence and the effect Jim Morrison's had as a poet and a performer. The Doors never really fell out of public grace as the audience has grown, the record-buying audience, I hate that term, but as the audience has grown, so has appreciation for the Doors.
Why has the magic still lasted? Why are they still sounding so fresh? Why do the records still sound dynamite? And there still hasn't been another band like them.
Because they were. They were incredible, and I mean, even when the Doors were around, even when Jim was standing on stage and screaming and breathing, people said that your music's timeless. The Doors, to my knowledge, were the first to fuse jazz and rock. They were credited with the first jazz rock fusion. They fused theater rock and poetry. They're good.
What kind of influence did Jim Morrison have on your life? You met him when you were 13. In fact, how did you meet him?
I met Jim Morrison through my baseball umpire, who told me if I hit a home run, he'd take me to see the Doors in concert. And I thought he was going to take me to a hardware store that evening. And I saw the Doors in concert, and I'll never forget, we were in his, he was the road manager at the time with Bill Siddons, who went on to become their manager, and we were in his VW van unloading their Jordan amplifiers, and this guy leaned up against the windshield while I was pulling the microphones out, and I looked up. He scared me, you know, and I said, "Who's that?" And Rich said, "That's Jim Morrison. He's really crazy," you know. And about 45 minutes later, I got to see just how crazy he was. And that was my first Doors concert, and I sat there and I watched them, and I've never seen anything and been more in the here and now in my life than I was at that concert, and I just decided then that somehow I was going to do this for the rest of my life with this band.
You definitely made an impression. Now, 10 years later, you've just co-authored a book with Jerry Hopkins, which isn't out yet, and give us some background information. The preparation of this book, I mean, what an exhausting journey to go through of a guy who really was neglected and really not known and was called controversial, but was really someone who was really special.
Well, Jim's probably one of the best known and least understood of all the rock and rollers. Certainly one of the most elusive. I must give Jerry credit for researching Jim's past. A fan once said that they'd like to think that Jim was never born, that he just arrived one day. And true enough, Jim said that his parents were dead in his earliest biography, which is curious. So, of course, they weren't, but Jim said he didn't want to involve anybody that didn't want to be involved. So, anyway, how I got involved with Jerry Hopkins in writing this book, when Jerry was researching Jim's latter life, when he got to the rock star days, which takes up the better portion of the book. He interviewed me as a friend of Jim's, and we communicated real well, and we stayed in touch by telephone, and I went up and visited him and read the first draft of the book, and stayed in touch with him, and when it became time to sell the book, as the Doors representative, I said, listen, I've had pretty good luck selling Jim Morrison and the Doors, and I'd like to represent you on this. And he said, well, out of sight, I'd love to have you. And I read the book, and I thought it really lacked well, it was rich with facts and rich with research and fascinating data. It didn't really have an in-person quality. It really didn't have, it didn't feel like Jim. Jim wasn't alive in the book. It was like a report on Jim's life, and I asked Jerry if I could try and give the book that quality, and he said, yeah, go ahead, and I did that, and Warner's bought the book.
When Jim died in 1971, he was going toward a film career, which was his thing anyways, coming from the UCLA Cinema School. Yeah. Wasn't he working with Michael McClure, and weren't there some film plans and some properties or projects that were going to be developed?
Yeah, well, about the time the Doors were recording L.A. Woman, Jim was working, his creative output was incredible. He was working on several films of which he was both the creative author and the star. He collaborated with Michael on the screenplay for The Beard. He was talking to several producers. He talked to Steve McQueen. One major Hollywood producer really felt that Jim could be the James Dean of the 70s, was the phrase he used. I guess he hadn't been acquainted with the fact that Jim was referred to James Dean of rock and roll, but at any rate, Jim was definitely headed towards film. Ray and Jim met in the UCLA Film School, and that the Doors were always headed towards film, and Jim and Ray particularly, yeah.
He was special.
Jim, yeah, he was.
Was it difficult reliving some of the tender moments of your life and your involvement with him in the Doors?
Well,
especially for a book.
Yeah, it was, but it felt real good. It was like thanking Jim. You know, it was like I never thought Jim had really appropriately been introduced to today's audience. So writing the book was my opportunity to say, thank you, man, and here you are as I felt you, and I hope they felt you as well as I did through my doing.
Good. I'd like to thank you for coming by and spending some time with us.
Well, thank you.
See you soon.
That's good to see you.
Larry Laser.
Hi, Larry.
And I'd like to thank Mr. Sugerman, too. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Harvey, for the interview, and especially thanks for bringing those clips down, getting a chance to see the Doors in action. And we have some more.